Good morning, everybody. Dan Bates, President and CEO, Greater Hamilton Chamber of Commerce, and thanks for joining us once again for Coffee and Conversation. So today we have a great guest speaker that we'll be getting to in just a little bit. We're going to do some self-introductions and different things, but we thank you for joining us. For those of you who are on Zoom, you can ask questions of the speaker. For those of you that are on Facebook Live, you'll have to type in your questions and we will repeat them on Zoom to the speaker. So everybody gets to participate. So once again, we will get to our guest speaker in a minute, but I'm excited. John Kirsch is going to be our speaker from Kirsch CPA. And when you say the name Kirsch or John Kirsch, everyone thinks that it's a stamp of approval as far as integrity, credibility. So we're very excited to have John, and also Small Business Person of the Year. So can't wait to get to his presentation. With that, I'm turning it back to Tiffany or Laura, whoever is taking over.
Okay, so we'll do some self-introductions. I'm just going to start at the top of my screen, kind of we'll work our way down. So Diane, why don't we start with you?
Morning, I'm Diane Glover. I'm with Kirsch CPA Group.
Okay, Tammy.
Tammy Walton, the Greater Hamilton Chamber.
Lisa.
Lisa Sandlin in PowerWorks, Own Your Life, Health, and Wealth.
Nancy.
Nancy O'Neill with the Greater Hamilton Chamber.
Ron.
Ron Hotchkiss, Valley Central Bank.
Let's do Janie.
Janie Cochran with Parachute, Butler County Court-Appointed Special Advocates.
Judith.
Judith Duarte, an intern with the Greater Hamilton Chamber of Commerce.
Great. Anne.
Hi, I'm Ann Arnett. I'm with Gateway Springs Health Campus.
Great. Okay, we have a couple more popping on. They are registered. Good morning, Joan. We're just doing self-introductions. If you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, Joan Stidham, The Blank Space.
Great. Good morning, Scott. If you want to introduce yourself.
Scott Wolf, Wolf & Associates. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Great. All right. So John, we'll go ahead and move into your presentation. Again, those who are watching Facebook Live, feel free to post a comment if you have a question, and we will ask that during the meeting. John, I'll just kind of raise my hand if we have somebody on Facebook Live to let you know. So you should have, and you have the ability to share your screen. I know you have a presentation, so you can start when you're ready.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here. Happy Tuesday morning. What a beautiful morning it is. Take this weather all year round and help us to soldier on through these.
Post a comment if you have a question.
Soldier on through these times. Now, I'm only going to use the word unprecedented one time because my daughter lives in Chicago and she was home to visit us over the weekend. And she was talking about her position. She's a physical therapist at a large rehab institute in Chicago. And she said, if I have another meeting with my team and somebody uses the word precedented, I'm just going to scream. So I promise I won't use the word unprecedented. That's it. Again, my name's John Kirsch, managing partner of Kirsch CPA Group. I'll tell you a little bit about our firm in just a second. We do have a series of slides here, but that's just simply meant to guide the conversation. I'm much more interested in the questions that you guys have and not listening to myself talk. So raise your hand, stop at any time during the presentation. We don't need to get to the end of the presentation to ask questions. Really, this will be a lot better for everybody if we're conversing and dialogue. So I'll share my screen here. We have named our presentation here, The Path Forward. Can everybody see the presentation? Okay, good. resilience, recovery, and resurgence. So just a little bit about our practice. And again, just so you get some context about where we're coming from here, our practice was established in 1991. I had a career in public accounting that predated that by about 12 years. We have 38 people on our team, moved our headquarters to downtown Hamilton in 2018. And as an aside, that has worked out much more fabulously than we could have ever anticipated. It is one of the best strategic moves we've made in the history of our organization. The clients we serve really are located throughout the tri-state, from northern Kentucky up to Columbus, east and west, and we have clients in all types of industries. We've been named one of the largest CPA firms in Cincinnati now for 12 years by the Business Courier, and probably the thing that I'm most proud of as an organizational leader is that we've been a finalist for Best Places to Work for 3 years and looking to continue that streak. So enough about us. I just want to give you some context as to what we're about as an organization. So we've, again, named our presentation in a specific way. We really see three stages to this. We have spent the last 90 to 120 days working very intimately with all of our clients. We've had hundreds of conversations about what is on their mind. We have tried to take from that what we see are some best practices, and that's the purpose of the conversation here. So as we start the conversation, here are just some very big picture takeaways. So the first one would be uncertainty is a given. Now that may not seem like a nugget of wisdom, but the takeaway that I think is relevant to most organizational leaders is not that the fact that uncertainty exists, but that in order to be effective in moving our organizations forward, you have to embrace that is the reality. So not just acknowledging that it exists, but embracing it as a reality and how you go about leading and managing your organization. The other thing that again maybe is somewhat obvious, but really is critical, is that different industries are impacted in different ways. And that ranges everywhere from a struggle for survival to the flip side of that continuum would be organizations that have an opportunity to thrive in this environment. And there's every conceivable situation in between there. So as we walk through some of the strategies and discussions here, it's not very impactful to you to generalize, although in a presentation of this length, we have to generalize, but just understand that strategies and tactics here are very situationally specific. As part of that uncertainty, I think some of us came across some terms about a recovery that maybe were a little foreign to us. We hear about a U recovery, a V recovery, a swoosh recovery. I had a client call me up back in March and, hey, do you think we're going to have a swoosh recovery? I got to be honest with you, I never heard that term before. And what it gets down to is how quick is the economy going to recover? This gets to that point of uncertainty. Anybody that tells you they know the answer to that, I would run away from them as fast as I could, because nobody knows. And so as we determine our tactics and strategy for moving forward, again, having a mindset of being willing to pivot and to look at things differently is going to be the resurgence aspect that we speak to here. In terms of choosing your partners carefully, I think throughout the last 90 to 120 days, it's become apparent to a lot of organizational leaders that maybe in certain aspects of their relationships, maybe they weren't, their relationships weren't as close as maybe they thought they were, and I'll give some examples to that. You know, for example, a shout out to the chamber. I know the chamber has been relentless in supplying information to the members about the various aspects, the various recovery programs. Of course, we won't be able to get through this presentation without talking about the triple P, the PPP program. But the chamber has been excellent. So my kudos to them. Our organization has certainly tried to achieve a balance. Diane Glover from our organization is on the Zoom call here and has led that charge, trying to balance between an information overload versus being timely. And that's a difficult balance. I know each of you that are listening in here have been barraged with a fire hose of information. So, and again, in other aspects, some that are obvious here, particularly with the PPP, that maybe some partnerships that you thought you had didn't work out that way. I think it just points to, as you move forward, think about the nature of those partnerships. Next point about don't use COVID as a catch-all excuse for every ill that is impacting your organization. I hear this all too often of people saying, oh, this COVID, that COVID, when in fact, there were circumstances that existed long before COVID. Don't let that cloud your thinking. If there are other issues to solve, face those issues. Kind of the last takeaway here, and I've heard this from dozens, unsolicited, from organizational leaders that said, this crisis has really shown them who in their organization was willing to step up and who they can count on, and candidly, who wasn't. So I don't know if any of you have experienced that. Be interested in any feedback on that, but that seems to be a consistent theme. So moving on here, again, quickly as we work through this presentation, and I do want this to be quickly, in terms of emerging best practices, we've got 4 areas that we'd like to cover. And again, we have a short time frame here. So by the very nature, we're going to cover these at a surface level. This is absolutely not an exhaustive, all-encompassing list. But as we have worked with our business clients and not-for-profit organizations that we work with, we have seen these 4 major topics are the ones to focus on for this resurgence in the future. So that would be your team, your customers, your finance, and then strategic agility. So let's start with team considerations. So again, this is a result of our own experience as an organization and working with hundreds of businesses and getting their feedback. So that's the nature of where these best practices are coming from. So again, just 3 major bullet points here. First of all, the most important point here is to stay engaged with your team. I realize there's people with all different types of circumstances, with maybe no employees, to a handful of employees, to a lot of employees, to people that went complete remote, that didn't have that capability to work remotely. So there's all different types of circumstances here. But the takeaway, regardless of those circumstances, there is, again, this is an obvious point, is that there's a lot of anxiety out there about a lot of different things. Child care issues, you name it. That's one of 100. People are really anxious. Good people, not excuse makers, not coasters. Your good people are anxious as well. So again, the takeaway here is not that that's the case, but to do something about it, okay? Stay engaged with these people more than you ever have ever in the past. Morale, guarding your morale is the #1 point that you can have for future success here. And we have found that being honest with people and being honest, don't sugarcoat the facts, but lead with confidence. Let your people know that, yes, you do have a plan, and be confident about that and get input from them. Our people have given us fantastic ideas, and we've seen the same thing from our clients as well. Listen to them. They have many of the answers. The next consideration on the people that was alluded to when a few of us were on the conversation early here is, you know, those that had people that moved away from their normal work environment. You know, what is that going to mean? You know, we still have people with childcare issues. Either their childcare isn't open, or they're concerned about their children going back. And we have people with our own health concerns, with their own health concerns about coming back to our office. So in full transparency here, when the stay-at-home order came from the governor in March, late March, we were deemed an essential business, so we could have stayed in business and carried on just as if nothing happened. We made a conscious decision not to do that. We had the capability to move our people to work on a distributed basis. We have had distributed work arrangements in our organization for 20+ years. We have permanent employees that live in California, Michigan, Northern Ohio, Pennsylvania. So that was a familiar feel for us. What was not a familiar feel was those people that had not had that experience of working remotely. So we moved essentially our entire team to work on a distributed basis, and we're now working through that the scenarios of people coming back to the office. People have health considerations. You know, they're concerned about their own health, and people with childcare concerns, and people who just said, hey, we have one person in particular, one of our management team, that we had to pry her out of her seat. We never thought in a million years she would be interested in working remotely, but she really adapted to that and is thinking, this might be a thing for me for the future. So there's all types of considerations there. I would encourage you on that regard to think outside the box. Those types of arrangements can work. They're not for everybody. So when we think about key points for success on a distributed work arrangement, I can tell you, we have learned through the School of Hard Knocks, it is not for everybody. Everybody cannot be successful in that environment. And if anybody wants to, I don't want to belabor that point, but if anybody wants to talk about that more, I'd be happy to chat with you again. We have a lot of experience in that regards. Okay, let's talk about customer considerations. So again, stay engaged. Your customers have the same anxiety that you have. This is an opportunity to position yourself as that trusted advisor in whatever regard. We've found through this process, we don't even need to say much on conversations. It's a matter of listening to your customers and give them a place to someone to talk to that is a sympathetic ear, and do that on a proactive basis. Don't sit back and let them call you and say, hey, I got some issues. You think you can help me? In whatever regard that is, and whatever level of service you have for your customers, and whatever service or product offering you have, you can be strategic with them. It has to be proactive and be engaged with them. and be creative on behalf of your customers. Again, we could talk about this for hours, but just don't think of things the same way. There are so many different ways that you can impact your customer base. And again, be brave to go out and think of things in a different way. Don't stop marketing. I didn't have the opportunity to sit on the presentation by Tommy Long, although I did go back last night, and he was a guest on this program a few weeks ago. If you haven't watched that, I'd recommend going back and watching that. He did an excellent job, better than I ever could, he used some racing analogies of, putting your foot down on the accelerator. There's a lot of ways to keep your name in front of your customers and prospects without spending a lot of money. There's a lot of ways to do that. Go back on YouTube and look at that presentation by Tommy. Okay, now probably more of what you may have been expecting from the numbers guy. Although the work that we do with our clients is much more than just the numbers, but of course the numbers play an important part. So as we talk about liquidity and finance through this current set of circumstances, here are some key takeaways. And again, these are all surface level. If people have questions about more details about any of these, I'll be happy to dive into that. So the theme here in terms of finance and liquidity, we've kind of captioned that as live to fight another day. Getting through the tough circumstances now, given again that is unique to each organization and to each industry, but whatever that circumstances are, managing your finances so that you're still around for that resurgence and take advantage of the opportunities. The most important thing I can recommend for you to do is to model out your cash flow. Now, it doesn't have to be anything massive or complicated. Understanding where your cash flow might wind up over the next 3 months, 6 months, 12 months is, if you don't take one other thing away from this presentation, please at least consider doing that. And I would also add, when I talk with clients, when our organization talks with our clients about this, often get brushed back in terms of, well, why bother doing that? I can't predict the future. Hey, John, you're talking out of both sides of your mouth. Your first slide said uncertainty. Okay, the objective here is not to predict the future when you're modeling your cash flow. That's a fool's errand. It can't be done. If I was able to do that, I probably wouldn't be sitting here talking to you right now. And that's not the objective. The objective of that exercise, and again, it can be a very simple exercise, is to understand the what ifs, that if certain things happen, here's going to be the impact on your cash flow. And that allows you to, and here is the psychological impact of that. And I know this sounds a little strange, but when the fear, what causes that deer in the headlights syndrome from business owners and anybody, I mean, this happens in all aspects of life, but specific to business owners, that fear of the unknown. And we have found that walking through this process, understanding the ramifications of the what ifs, takes away that fear of the unknown. And now that anxiety can go away and you can utilize that negative energy and put it into a positive way. So again, that to me is the most important thing that business owners and not-for-profit leaders can understand. The next couple steps on that is to do a stress test. That's a subset of doing a cash flow model, and all that means is looking at some worst case scenarios. Okay, most people don't want to do that. Okay, I don't even want to think about if my sales go down by 50%. My point is, better to have a plan for if that happens than to just to wait for it to happen, then have to panic. That again is the objective of going through this modeling. Know your break-even point. This is an exercise of splitting out, you know, what are your costs are fixed. If you have rent and you have to pay your rent and utilities and loan payments to the bank, okay, those are going to be there regardless. Okay, what does my revenue have to be to make those fixed costs? Again, a subset of modeling your cash flow. Okay, knowing some key metrics to follow. The point here is key metrics. Okay, not 36 things you're looking at on a daily basis, because it'll get totally lost. Key metrics. What are 2 or 3 or 4 things that are truly going to drive your organization? And again, that's very organizationally specific. It's not hard to do. That sounds really complex. It is not at all. And again, a key point for working through this liquidity and cash flow. The outset of all this is developing some options. Okay, not to predict the future, but at least to know what some options are before it becomes more of a crisis. Okay, that's finance. Okay, we could talk for a day about our friends, the PPP loans. I have to tell you, this was the most chaotic thing I have ever been involved with in my 42-year career in finance. I don't even know how to describe it. I will say this, we recognized from our organization early on how significant this was going to be. We put every single resource in our organization into helping our clients achieve these PPP loans. We worked with clients on more than a couple hundred of these. I'm happy to say we got 100% success rate for the clients that wanted them. This story is not yet completed, okay? Just in the last 10 days, there have been some very significant provisions enacted. The famous 8-week spend period is now 24 weeks. There's some extensions for reestablishing your workforce. So the impact of this is it's going to make it significantly easier for most businesses to achieve full forgiveness of these loans. That's the good news. The bad news is there are still a ton of unanswered questions about how forgiveness is going to work, what the documentation requirements are going to be. There is still more to come here. There is a growing chorus of a recommendation. For example, this is an example. This has not been enacted. I'm just giving you a flavor of what has been suggested, is that any loan that is less than $150,000 automatically forgiven. No documentation required, no nothing. Now again, that is a proposal. That is not enacted. Again, just giving you a flavor of what might still be to come. I can tell you that the financial institutions, and again, we dealt with many financial institutions through this process and had intricate dialogue with them about this. And as most of you know that were involved with that, they were as much in the dark as everybody else, and that's not their fault. This was a figured out as we go kind of deal. But these banks do not want these loans on their books. It is a horrible deal for the banks. So 1% interest rate. They have the issues related to collection problems. That falls on the bank. So the banks are one of the parties that are lobbying hard to make forgiveness easier. So again, the takeaway here is stay tuned. More to come, I'm certain. A couple of other liquidity considerations, and we're just about done here with the presentation. I've listed there some particular items. The EIDL loans, EIDL, economic injury disaster loans, that's a whole nother can of worms outside of the PPP loans. People are starting to get notifications that they are eligible for these loans, and the documents are going out. Sign here and return the documents to the SBA and you get the loan. It's not as simple as it looks. These loans have a lot of restrictions attached to them, and they are loans. There is no forgiveness provision whatsoever related to the EIDL loans. And we have reviewed the documents, the loan documents, and again, I would view these as truly those people, organizations that aren't going to survive any other way unless they take that money. Enlisted some other options there for dealing with liquidity. Communication with your lender. When the economy turns bad and financial situations turn bad, there's an inclination to want to maybe hide things from your lender. That is typically not a good idea. The news is going to come to the forefront at some point. And again, we've talked with hundreds of lenders over the years, and the rule is be upfront, and you have a better chance of obtaining what you want to get to. Last slide, strategic agility. This is kind of a catch-all, again, for being strategic. Now getting out of the trenches and talking about the bigger picture. Understand what your planning time horizons are, and depending on where you're at, that can be different. It could be hourly. If you're running a e-commerce site and you're looking at, you know, what your flow of your business is, that might be, you know, the new sales in the last hour might be relevant. Others, you might be looking 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. And I'll give you an example of that. We have a lot of clients that are contractors. And if they have signed contracts and projects that were in process in March, well, if they didn't know any better, they could look around and say, life's normal. What epidemic? But, you know, what's going to happen next January, February, March? That's the time horizon for them. And again, very situationally specific. As I mentioned earlier on, get comfortable with uncertainty and embrace that as a reality and a fact of life that's going to drive your leadership and management. You know, control what you can and ignore what you can't. There are a lot of diversionary things out there. If you try to worry about everything, you're going to miss worrying about the important things. Be creative and open to change. And most importantly, opportunity for leadership abounds here. I mean, my challenge to people is to step up and be a leader. And with that, I'm going to quit talking and see if there's any questions.
Okay, John, since nobody's talking. So you talked about the EIDL loan. I'm a sole proprietor in several different businesses. So I have a design firm, I have a financial firm, and I own several pieces of rental property. So I did get the emails about the EIDL loan. What I read in the EIDL loan, and it said that you had 12 months to pay the money back. It is at mine is at 3.75% interest. Not knowing where the economy is going, not understanding. I think my financial business will stay pretty solid, but my design practice is always up in the air. So I took the loan. I haven't even checked to see if it's in my bank yet, But I took the loan to just have it there in case I needed it, because I was looking at what could happen 6 months down the road. But as I was reading it, and I met with Songmi Kim from the Small Business Administration to try to understand, they don't even really know what all is going on with this loan and what you can spend the money on. There's a clause in there that says you can pay yourself a salary. But if you've never drawn a salary from your business, can you pay yourself a salary? So do you have any of those answers?
Well, you're speaking to one of the major concerns that we have, and there's a couple in these loan documents, a couple provisions. So there is a provision that does restrict the ability of owners to take distributions and withdrawals from their business. So that is highly concerning for most of our clients. Now, if you think about that from a policy standpoint, if this truly is meant to be an emergency loan to say to a business owner, hey, you can't take distributions from your business. If you have extra money, you need to be paying back your loan. I mean, that makes a little bit of sense. But for most of our clients, when we point out that provision to them, they're no thanks. There's also collateral. I mean, the SBA, excuse me, is taking a collateral position for every asset that the business owns. There is a personal guarantee, and all of these are much different than the PPP loan program, which has no collateral and no personal guarantee. And buried deep in the fine print, and whether the SBA will enforce this or not, who knows? But it is in the loan documents that says they can require you to have a set of reviewed financial statements, which is something similar to an audit, not quite as intrusive as an audit, but depending on your business, that's a $5,000 to $10,000 nut every year if that's required. So for those reasons, we have had a handful of clients who have taken the loans. And, you know, again, our job is not to say take it or don't take it. Our job is to point out these considerations, and then people have to make a business decision. You know, is that the right move for them or not?
Yeah, well, that's still where I'm at. Like I said, I think I know I signed the documents to take it. I have not checked to see if it has hit my account yet. But there are a lot of concerns with it, because I couldn't get any answers, even from the SBA.
Yep.
You can't get answers.
So the good news is there is no prepayment penalty. So
right. I did check that one first.
So if
So
you want to pay it back, all those restrictions are lifted. And
well, the way that I looked at it was it would cost, for the amount that I got, which was about $45,000, was that it would cost me about $1,500 to have that sit there for a year, just in case. And I had to weigh whether the peace of mind was worth $1,500 to know that I had that if I needed it. And for me, it was like being a sole proprietor for my entire life. It was like just knowing that I have that money is a peace of mind that I was willing to pay for. But I'm scared to use it.
that sounds like a very sound business decision.
Good. I'm glad you think so. I try.
All right, who else has questions? This is the interactive part.
If any of you are out there on Facebook and have a question, type it in, and the sky's the limit. If I don't know, I'll be the first guy to say that.
I have a question. We have a line of credit with our SBA loan, and the line of credit had a 5-year term. I got a letter yesterday saying, you know, the line of credit is going to mature, And so I said, okay, not a problem. How do I go about reapplying? And they said, we're not taking any applications for any lines of credit at this point in time because of the current situation. And I thought, you know, that was the first time I've heard that. That's from Wells Fargo Bank, which is a major US bank. And that sounds an awful lot like 2008, 2009. And that gives me concern about the economic health going forward for small business. Any comments on that?
Yes. So one of the other hats I wear, I seem to have several, but I also serve on the board of Access Business Finance, which is the local community development corporation for Butler and Warren counties. Now, our focus in the CDC is approving SBA loans, but the 504 loans. I'm guessing that the one that you have is in the 7A category, which is a different loan program. So
7A.
7A. So the 7A programs are actually the PPP program is an extension of the 7A program. So the same infrastructure that the 7A programs were built on, that's how the PPP loans came about. Those loans are made directly by a bank. Now, we get information through Access. Again, we do not deal with 7A loans, but we get information as a board about the structure of those loans. I'm going to guess that that is a bank-specific policy, not an SBA policy. I would shop for another institution, or at least look around. I do not. I can't say this with 100% certainty, but I'm going to say it with a high degree of confidence that that is not an SBA initiative. I can tell you on the 504 program, we are going gangbusters. We approve 2 or 3 deals a week on the 504 program. So there is not a constriction of credit from the SBA on a general basis.
Yeah, thank you. Much appreciated. I figured it was not an SBA deal. I was just concerned that if major banks are going to start making these calls, it is going to constrict credit. Hopefully it's just a one-off and it's just a knee-jerk reaction, but I expressed my displeasure to management. We'll move on.
Got it.
Anybody else? Okay, you did a great job, John. That was lots of great information. Like I said, we'll have this on our YouTube channel.